General Dan Bolger, thank you very much for coming and visiting UNC today. You wrote a book on why America lost the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Short answer, short question, short answer, why did the United States lose these wars?
Klaus, we didn't fight the wars that our military is designed to fight. Our military is designed to fight short, decisive wars against a conventional uniformed enemy. We put them into two big counterinsurgencies against enemy in civilian dress mixed in with the population.
Why was it necessary to go into Iraq, or wasn't it?
With Iraq, we were already fighting there. We never really ended the war after 1991. The U.S. and its allies thought we had, but in fact we were flying over Iraq and bombing them almost every day and night, killing Iraqis in their air defense sites and things like that. The big question is, should we have done a ground invasion? I think that needed a lot more looking before we did that.
Right. So would you argue that the war against Afghanistan, against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, was a war no president could have avoided, but that the Iraq war was an avoidable war?
I think the way I would say it is the war against Al-Qaeda no president could have avoided. There had to be a response to what happened on 9/11. That we chose to expand the war to the replacement of the Taliban and then a long-term civil war in Afghanistan where we took sides against the Taliban, that was a choice and probably not a smart one. In the case of Iraq, we already had a war going on with Saddam Hussein and his forces after the 1991 Gulf War. We chose to escalate that with a ground invasion. That was an option. We could have continued the low-level war we were fighting just using air power.
Mm-hmm. Where lies the fault of the politicians? Where is the fault of the leading senior military?
Well, the military people are the experts on the use of military force. So we have to be as emphatic as we can on the opportunities, the options, and the risks when military force is used. I think we did a good job of laying out options to the politicians. I don't think we did a good job of laying out risks, particularly the risk of casualties and the risk of time, and that we backed into these two counterinsurgencies, which are very lengthy campaigns, even if they work. The role of politicians in the United States, we have a civilian control of the military, so they always issue the final order. But to some degree, they're going to always listen to the advice of the military. They can choose to reject that advice, but they should listen to it. We have to make sure as military guys, we give them good advice.
Mm-hmm. It has been argued that Abu Ghraib and similar enhanced interrogation techniques, torture, atrocities, were very much the exception. But even if that is true, is the exception acceptable in a professional army?
Well, it is not, and that's one of the reasons the military investigated and punished those actions. Those are against our Uniform Code of Military Justice. An army is made up of people. Sometimes people don't do the right thing, and there's means of discipline within the service to do it. And I think we have to distinguish between events that were wrong and were disciplined versus matters of policy, and it was never a matter of policy to abuse prisoners.
You were serving in Iraq for a long time. You were in the American military for 35 years, many years in a very leading position, three-star general in the end. Did you ever have regrets? Did you ever want to speak out? Did you ever want to resign, perhaps?
I definitely have regrets to this very day about the men and women I lost. 76 men and 4 women killed under my command who did not return alive from the campaigns I was in. I did think about it, and I knew something was wrong. I knew we had not achieved a decisive victory in Iraq, and by the time I got to Afghanistan in 2011, it was quite obvious. And I didn't think we were going in the right direction, but I also thought I owed it to the men and women I served with to stick with, they couldn't get out of it. It's not a resignation option for a corporal. And so I was going to stick with it and stick with them. In retrospect, I wish I would have been more emphatic with the political leaders.
Did you blame the political leaders? Did you blame President Bush, the Secretary of Defense of the day? Who did you blame?
In the end, we have to blame ourselves, and I blame myself both as a military guy who knew better and should have more strongly advised to that effect, and if necessary resigned. And while those leaders certainly had the authority at that time, they're elected representatives, and the American people in the end have to hold their elected representatives and their military to account.
Thank you. What is your advice regarding future scenarios? How can we avoid similar mistakes, similar flawed policy and perhaps military decisions in the future?
I would say absolutely we must look at the risks involved in any commitment of military force, air, ground, sea, doesn't matter. We have to look at that, and we have to have a very thorough airing of what may go wrong and not just think on the optimistic side that it will work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Your book is very critical about the American military, particularly about generals, you know, that they didn't think enough and didn't react or give politicians the right advice. What was the feedback from your fellow soldiers at a senior level to your book?
Some senior people are in agreement with that. Some are not. And I think a lot of them, it's very hard to think about failure. It's going to take a while. We saw at the end of Vietnam, it took one generation to sort of move out of the ranks and go into retired life before the next generation came up and solved it. The guys who sorted the military out after Vietnam were the younger people who had fought there, and I think we'll see the same from this one.
So you're calling for a truth commission regarding Afghanistan?
I'm all in favor of truth, Klaus.
Who isn't? When you look at the current situation, Syria, ISIS, again turmoil in Iraq and in Libya and the entire Middle East, what is your advice for the sitting president?
It would be to understand who our friends are in that region, to back and empower them, and to let them sort out their own countries, with some help from us perhaps, but not us in the lead.
Mm-hmm. There's always the dilemma of the United States supporting the nasty guys in the region, the dictators, the guys we normally wouldn't like to be associated with. What do you make about that dilemma?
It's very difficult. You're in an area where there's bad guys and worse guys in many cases, and as much as we can, we choose the best of unpalatable options.
Right. And what is your policy advice for how to deal with ISIS right now?
I think we're doing what we can against ISIS, which is to say we're working with the Kurdish forces, we're working with the Iraqi government forces such as they are, and we're letting them try and take the lead. And it's frustrating, it's slow, it's inexact, but it's got to be their problem to solve. We can't solve it for them.
President Obama's drone warfare has been much criticized. How would you see that?
We shouldn't kid ourselves that drones are in some way surgical or antiseptic. They are not. A drone, just like any aircraft, when it releases a missile or a bomb, does a lot of damage on the ground. And not everybody it hits is an enemy. It's safer for us because we don't have a pilot in the air, but it's no safer in terms of the damage that it does on the ground. And we need to think through it. It should not be something done lightly.
Do you think because there is no personnel, no American personnel involved, it is done more lightly than having soldiers involved?
I fear that may be the case, and I think we've got to, as American citizens, we've got to hold our political leaders to account, our elected leaders, and insist that they think it through before they employ drones or any other military force.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
General Daniel Bolger, thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks.